Gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are right now. My name is Romesh Boyrou, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. Allow me to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today on our second webinar, which is on achieving a healthy experience at African airports during the restart. And this is in the context of a series of webinars organized by ACI Africa for African airports. At the outset, let me inform you of a few housekeeping rules which are extremely important that we observe in order that we have a healthy webinar today. So first and foremost, please ensure that your microphone and the camera on your devices are in the switch off mode. Secondly, we will take all questions at the end of the presentations. However, if you have any questions in between, please use the conversation or chat icon in order to send your questions to me. During the questions time, you can also use the raise your hand icon, and I will then call upon you to ask your questions. Then you will be able to switch on your microphone, ask your question, and afterwards switch it off. So these are some basic housekeeping rules, which is extremely important for all of you to observe today. Ladies and gentlemen, ACI Africa, the voice of African airports, is by your side during this unprecedented crisis and challenging times for our industry. The number of COVID-19 cases continue to rise on the continent. It reached 204,000 cases yesterday. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC Africa, predicts that the situation on the continent will get worse before it gets better. But we cannot continue keep hiding from COVID-19. We need to get out of this crisis with the appropriate measures to ensure our sustainability in the future and resistance over time. We need to be prepared also for the next crisis, hence the word resilience, because no one was prepared for the COVID-19 crisis. The restart and recovery of the airport industry entails the following. Number one, protecting our people, protecting our business, and protecting our future. We hope that this webinar will provide you with some answers to your queries and concerns. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our panel of speakers today. Our first speaker is Mr. Ali Tunsi, whom who needs no presentation. He is the Secretary General of ACI Africa, and he will be introducing the topic today. Our second speaker is Mrs. Josephine Soroses. She is the Strategic Executive Human Resources from Namibia Airports Company and also the Vice President ACI Africa Regional Committee Human Resources. She will be speaking about how to get our staff motivated during and also at the restart at our airports. The third speaker is Mr. Charles Hanson Adu. Charles is the Group Executive Airports Management from Ghana Airports Company Limited and is also the President of the ACI Africa Regional Committee on Safety and Technical. Charles will be telling us about the healthy passenger journey experience in the new normal. And last but not least is Mrs. Charlene Perumal. Charlene is the Group Manager Technical Research and Development from Airports Company South Africa and is also a collaborator of ACI Africa for a long time on innovation She will be speaking about innovation in the times of COVID-19, the crisis, in the new normal, but also will touch on the communication aspect, which is extremely important during those times of crisis. So without further ado, let me now introduce the first presentation. Is from Mr. Ali Tunsi. Ali, over to you. Ali, you have the floor. So whilst we wait for Ali, are you here? Ali, you seem to be having a problem with your mic. Ali, we can't hear you. Ali, we can't hear you. Let us move on to the next. Okay, Ali, we can hear you now.
Okay,
we can hear you now. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will start from the beginning. Okay, we apologize from this technical problem. So, dear colleagues, member of ACI Africa, representative of the African aviation industry, distinguished guests and delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We are very pleased to welcome you in this first webinar in English dedicated to the restart of airport operation after the COVID crisis. And by being here today, you affirm your commitment and your determination for the recovery and the continuous development of the industry in Africa. Normally, we should meet in Mombasa in March this year, and the COVID-19 has prevented us. But ACI Africa will always find a way for airports to be together, to work and share best practices and support each other, especially in these difficult times. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the aviation industry has been and will continue to be unprecedented in its magnitude and scope for the industry. The rapid spread of the virus has prompted government to quickly restrict travels and close borders to limit the spread. This has had a drastic and damaging effect on the air transport industry around the world. The slowdown in traffic for African airport was experienced as from mid-March, reaching an almost stand still in May and June. How the traffic will recover in Africa is still uncertain. According to the best guesses, a low restart is expected in the third quarter of 2020. The anticipated drop in traffic for the first 6 months is expected to be the order of 55% and more than 47% for the year 2020. For the second quarter of 2020, the estimated loss of revenue for airports in Africa will be overwhelming, reaching 90% compared to the revenue forecasted without the COVID-19 crisis. The loss of airports revenue for Africa region for the year 2020 is estimated at about $2.2 billion, a drop of more than 51% compared to the revenue forecasted for this year, which was around $4.3 billion. In fact, we cannot afford to remain in this situation any longer, with many airports having already exhausted their meager cash reserves by maintaining the airport facilities during the lockdown period and maintaining operation for cargo, humanitarian, repatriation, and emergency flights, despite not receiving any revenues. Although many African airports have responded well to the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic by implementing a battery of measures to prevent the entry and spread of the virus across their border. It's now extremely important that African airports urgently put in place an adequate operational plan to allow the smooth reopening of their border after the end of the lockdown. What is more important now is the restart of airport operations, which is proving difficult and which will require the implementation of a new standard, which unfortunately can be very restrictive, at least at the start. Various measures may become necessary at airports, depending on the different phases of the pandemic, related medical criteria from recognized health authorities, and the stage of resumption of activities. The basic principle for airport operators are to protect the health and well-being of travelers, staff, and the public, to minimize the potential for the spread of communicable disease and to be able to maintain efficient operations. ACI Africa has already released a comprehensive guide on the restart and recovery for African airports. It's intended that this guideline and recommendation serve as a roadmap for all African airports to prepare their new business continuity plan in the most coordinated, consistent, and efficient manner. The guide is based on 6 key pillars, which, according to ACI Africa, are essential for restoring confidence of travelers at African airports, and namely, a good preparation, a motivated staff, a healthy airport, a healthy experience, a robust communication, and a financial viability. Besides the new health measures to be adopted and implemented at airports, the guide also converts on how to return to normal after the lockdown by taking into consideration the fundamentals of aviation, which remain safety and security. Safe and secure operation at all times are critical prerequisites for restarting the airport activities and the subsequent development of air traffic. It should therefore be ensured that any cost reduction strategy in those challenging times do not compromise those 2 priority pillars of aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, the 5 C to achieving a healthy experience for African airport are coordination, collaboration, cooperation, consistency, and communication. At the airport level, the preparedness phase is as critical as the response phase to the crisis in order to guarantee an efficient and successful restart and recovery. It's also important to nourish effective collaboration between the airport and the key agencies such as police, health, custom and immigration, among others, through committees. On the other hand, it's critical to initiate and promote multilateral cooperation between airports connected to your network to ensure a smooth and coordinated restart. It's therefore advised that you agree with airports within your network on the standard health message to disseminate to all passengers, so as to avoid surprises when reaching destination. I would also stress again here on the need to have a robust communication strategy during these times of crisis for the attention of traveling public. In order to restart confidence back in air travel, there is need to be factual and transparent in your message on the new measures in places at your airport, but also there is a need to inform passengers of what to expect at their destination. In fact, Ms. Charlene will expand more on the communication aspect later in this webinar. At the end of my speech, I hope that you will benefit from this webinar and the tool made available by ACI Africa to help you to restart your activity. And I ask you to not hesitate to share with us your experiences or to ask us to assist you if needed. I give the floor now to Mrs. Josephine Soros, Strategic Human Resources at the Namibian African Airport Company and the Vice President of ACI Africa Region Committee of Human Resources, to speak about how to prepare and keep our staff motivated for the restart. At the end of the presentation, I will be at your disposal to answer your question with the team. So thank you. So Josephine, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Ramesh, maybe you can assist me. My sharing button is disabled.
No problem. No problem. I'll do that for you.
I would like to make few comments, basically introductory comments in terms of Namibia, and I will link it up with the topic that I have in terms of how we can prepare our staff members to be motivated during these trying times. Now, Namibia is in Southern Africa, and Namibia Airports Company is a state-owned enterprise with the mandate to manage, operate, and develop commercial airports in the country. Our footprint has 2 international airports, which are our flagship airport, Hosea Kutako International Airport and Walvis Bay Airport at the coast of Namibia. The rest of the 6 airports are domestic airports. We recorded our 2 cases of COVID-19 on 13 March 2020, and almost immediately our head of state, Dr. Hake Geingob, declared a state of emergency and locked down the Khomas and Eronko regions, where the COVID-19 cases were reported. This included closing the borders and suspension of inbound and outbound flights. The state, after 3 weeks of monitoring the situation, locked down the entire country. The story is Namibia specific, but many of us in this webinar can tell or relate the story as the whole world is in this together. Moreover, we can only beat this challenge by facing it and fighting it together. Secondly, we cannot hibernate forever. We will have to learn to coexist with COVID-19. Therefore, I wish to share ACI guidelines for workforce management as we plan to reopen our airports. Many airports all over Africa, including African airports, all over the world, including African airports, for the past few months had scaled down operations like our Hosea Kutako and Eros Airport just to provide repatriation, cargo and overflight services, or has completely closed down operations. This, no doubt, has influenced the way we do business and the way we use our human resources. Today, we look at how we can make lemon juice out of lemons that COVID-19 has thrown at us. Through innovative people management guidelines to ensure that our organizations fulfill their mandates, that work continues while we are protecting and caring for our staff members to keep them healthy so that our passengers or travelers can have a healthy customer experience. Now, in this slide, we speak about protecting our employees, and we start with the PPE. Now, we should procure and provide additional protective equipment to combat the spread of COVID-19. Here, we use a slogan, wear a mask to protect me, to protect yourself. We should provide transparent protective shields that is either glass or plastic on counters of employees that have direct or frequent contact with the passengers or the public. For example, at our immigration counters or the information desk. I would like to stress that our responsibility as managers should not only end with providing PPE, but to ensure that our staff understands why and how they have to use the PPE. For example, a live demonstration of staff members or use of videos to demonstrate that you may not frequently touch your face while wearing a mask, or simply wash your hands before putting your face mask on, or how to wear and take off your mask correctly. Creating a conducive work environment for our employees will involve upscaling of hygiene protocols at workplace to create a clean and safe work environment. It will also involve development of improved cleaning and disinfection, checklists and guidelines, and increased frequency of cleaning and checking the areas. We also need to train our cleaning staff members on the improved hygiene protocols. Health and safety representatives at the workplace can be used to do monitoring and to submit reports on matters of safety concerns or health and safety concerns for managers and human resources to put corrective measures in place immediately. Human resources management is a collective effort. Every manager should take care of his or her human resources in the same way we have responsibility to manage the financial resources. Employees should observe social distancing between each other, and the shared office space should be rearranged to ensure that the 1.5 meter distance is observed. Please note that the 1.5 meter is a Namibian state-specific requirement. As we are aware, the WHO requirement is 1 meter. If space is limited, alternatively, protective shields should be installed to avoid close contact between colleagues. Installation of hand sanitizing stations at critical points identified as we opt for touchless dispensers. We have also distributed sanitizing hampers to our staff members for personal use. We should limit the number of people that can use a lift at a given time, depending on the square meter space of the lift. It can be either to a number 3 or 4, or the square meters will determine. It is advisable to deactivate the fingerprint access and attendance control, or rather to place a dedicated guard to operate the doors or the gates. We also have to ensure that these frontline staff members are appropriately provided with PPE and is using the PPE correctly. All staff screening, temperature screening at staff entrances every time a staff member enters the building. We can also intensify the screening by having periodic health checks, and you can encourage your employees to stay at home if they are not feeling well. Information sharing and guidance becomes very important if our staff members knows they are empowered. Therefore, we cannot stop emphasizing the importance of information sharing. Repeat the messages to embed the information. Mediums to use can include, for example, bulk texting, WhatsApp, electronic weekly newspapers, webinars, Teams meetings, and open air meetings, or face-to-face meetings, provided that the social distancing protocols and public gathering limits within the specific states are observed. I would like to give some examples of information that can be shared with staff, and that would include updating our employees on the latest trends of the disease, the COVID-19 safety tips to staff members, how to use and discard PPE, response and prevention plans and guides, what to do when exposed to potential case or actual case, having a tabletop exercise to ensure that we are test ready for response in case of suspected or confirmed cases at the workplace. Caring for the employees' well-being. In this trying and difficult times, it is important that our employees have the assurance that we as employers care about their well-being, be it physical, mental, or psychological. Mental health support is key, as the pressures of new ways of doing our work and the stress that comes with additional measures of self-protection, protecting the co-workers, protecting our families, and the society at large can be immense. We can put in place services such as mental and psychological support helplines for our employees. Staff record update. It is important to ensure that we have the latest contact details and next of kin information of our staff members. At the Namibia Airports Company, we conducted a staff personal record update exercise and collected the required information through an electronic survey, and we have updated the records to the recent information accordingly. Avoid stigmatization. Now, this invisible enemy that we are dealing with is an unknown phenomenon to all of us. And the fact that the disease is infectious can impact the way we respond and react to others, especially when one has been exposed to, affected, or infected. It is critical to manage stigmatization through providing correct information about the disease and discouraging the spread of false information that can cause panic. In instances where our staff members contracted the disease, recovery and has recovered fully and has to report back for work, our staff should avoid stigmatization and rather support the colleague to readapt. Workforce grouping and classification. Implementation of skeleton shifts becomes important to ensure that your critical resources are split into different groups. This will help to reduce the risk of exposure and ensure continuity in case of a confirmed or suspected case at workplace. Identification of vulnerable employees is key. This includes people with pre-existing health conditions expecting or breastfeeding mothers, for example, or your staff members that are due for retirement, and if possible, allow them to work from home. Readily available information, provide medical emergency and mental health help desk numbers to employees, and ensure that these numbers are displayed and visible. Have briefings on quarantine and response measures and procedures. Continuity of work and managing productivity. The way we work have drastically changed. The future of work is no more the future. It is now the present. With a total lockdown here in Namibia, all employees were requested to work from home except the essential services. With this, we quickly had to shift our mindsets from the traditional way of working, of physically having the employees at the workstations, to allowing them to work from home. Now, for many managers not being able to manage the input as opposed to the output, like not knowing when a person reported for duty, has created a challenge, and this requires a paradigm shift from emphasis on input to emphasis on output. It is no more about managing the person, but managing the productivity of the employee. Here are some of the tools to consider in managing the productivity. Say, for example, daily or weekly briefings through Microsoft Teams platforms, work schedules and planning, and monitoring activities. Alternative work tools. Until recently, internet connectivity and cybersecurity at office buildings were our focus. But now, with our employees working from home, we have to ensure that work tools are provided to our employees and staff members to have internet connectivity at home, for example. So what we have done is, for example, most of our employees have smartphones. So as a way to provide for them, we have basically implemented data packages, incentives for staff members, and this enable them to have connectivity at home and also to be able to work. We have policies where, as employers, we still provide desktops to certain staff members as opposed to laptops. Maybe we have now to revisit our policies and ensure that the staff members are enabled to work from home and that the IT support services are available to staff members from home. Continuity of training and learning. Development of skills is important, and with so many changes and new ways of working, it is simply critical that we keep on learning. The limitations to public gathering and traveling bans and face-to-face learning has become sort of impossible, but we can then consider and prioritize alternative learning methods, like, for example, e-learning or online classes, especially for our recurrent and compliance and critical skills trainings and recertifications. Union engagements. As we change the way we work, we should ensure that our strategic partners, such as the trade unions, are well informed with the relevant information to avoid misunderstandings as we implement the new ways of working. Additional administrative measures. To combat the spread of COVID-19 at workplace, we can review and redesign staff rosters to ensure that our staff members are deployed at different times. These groupings should, where possible, do virtual handovers, and the workplace should be disinfected before the new teams report for duty. All teams should at all times ensure that they adhere to the social distancing rules and comply with the PPE guidelines. Put in place a social distancing or additional hygiene protocols and signage in commonly used spaces like the kitchen, the bathroom, etc. For example, limit the number of employees allowed at a given time on a common area or have stickers on the floor indicating the safe distances. We can also implement visitors registration and limitations. We have created a log or a register for all visitors where we collect the contact details as well as record temperatures before the visitors are allowed to enter the buildings or the airports. This will then ensure that in case you have to do a contact tracing, that you have at least the contact information available of all the visitors. We have limited the number of visitors at a given moment. Here, I would like to share an example of how our supermarkets and shopping malls are operating. They have basically reduced the number of shoppers that are allowed in a shop to based on the square meters in the shop. So all customers, before you enter the shop, will have to register your name, and then they take the measurement of your temperature, and it is compulsory to wear a mask before entering the shops. Our hygiene protocols supply the sanitary wipes or disinfectants to ensure regular disinfection of frequently touched areas and ensure use of technology to reduce physical contact. Say, for example, like WhatsApp groups or radio telephones instead of face-to-face conversations. Microsoft Teams meetings, alternative technologies such as face recognition for time and attendance management as we disable the biometric systems for time and attendance to ensure safety of our employees. As I conclude, I would like to share an experience at one of our workstations. During the early days of COVID-19 in Namibia, a very visibly ill passenger visited our client services areas. And this created so much panic and scare, none of the frontline personnel wanted to assist the travelers that needed assistance to travel back to the country of origin because of all the travel bans. Now, this reminded us that whilst we are observing and complying with the guidelines, we should not forget our humanity. In order to remind our employees about the sense of togetherness to save livelihoods, we recorded a voice note and a video message from our CEO, giving a message to employees to not forget that our humanity comes first and that we can only win this if we fight it together. Now let us observe and use a combination of the measures to give our most valuable asset, a healthy employee experience, in order for them to enhance our passenger experience by providing a service with a smile that cannot be seen. But let me repeat that. Providing a service with a smile that can only be seen in the eyes, because we are all wearing masks when we provide the client services and when we engage with the staff, with the public. Thank you. Let me then hand over to Mr. Charles Hansen Atul to talk to us about the healthy airport experience at the restart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My presentation would cover two main areas, and that will be the creation of a healthy airport, where the new normal would involve regular cleaning, regular disinfection, personnel protection, and protecting of others, and then also the creation of a healthy experience for the passengers. So with reference to cleaning and disinfection, the new normal of today is to see to the very frequent disinfection of surfaces of high touch points. And this is because we all understand that the virus can be picked up from surfaces and transferred into other people through that medium. So it is important that we increase the total number of disinfection and cleaning that we do in the terminal. The science of the spread of the virus is always changing, and it's important that the airports always keep abreast with the science. There was some time back when the discussion was it would survive 72 hours on plastic and stainless steel and less than 4 hours on copper. In recent times, with the publications coming from the CDC and WHO, that is being revised. So it's important that we understand that this is an evolving situation. And because it's an evolving situation, so we need to keep abreast with the science at all. So our collaboration with the health authorities is very, very important here to inform us what to do at what time and what measures are no longer needed and what new measures needs to be introduced. We also have to increase the frequency of cleaning and disinfection of hand contact areas immediately after the surface has been contaminated with respiratory secretions. We also need to understand that now that we are on some form of lockdown or non-operations of major flights, we have to take full advantage of that time to do some very deep cleaning of areas that is inaccessible under normal circumstances. So really, before the restart happens, all the areas that needs to be tackled that are very deep in nature and extensive in nature as far as cleaning is concerned needs to be done at this time, so that by the time we get our flights back in, would have covered that area. There's also an advice out there to always favor local compliant disinfectants. It's very important because this will stimulate local industry. But you also need to liaise with your medical people on the use of chemicals. What type of chemicals are allowed? What types of chemicals are not allowed? It's very important you work in a very close contact nature with your health facilitators. It's very, very important. We also are advised to avoid the use of hands-in dryers in toilets and favor the use of paper towel dispensers. And still on cleaning and disinfection, it's very important that the major chains that we have to utilize in our facilitation chain, and that's where you have a lot of high touch points, need to be cleaned, and particular attention needs to be paid to those areas, such as the self-service kiosk, the counters, the baggage trolley, the lift travelators, handrails, vehicles, tables, telephones. These are all high touch points, cash registers, and we need to have the protocols very clearly explained to everybody to make sure that it is cleaned as often as possible. And this is directly related to your traffic density. So the more traffic density you have, the more you have to be doing this cleaning. It's very, very important that this protocol is understood. We also have to start in the new normal is to have a lot of sanitization stations around, but the medium of dispensing the sanitizers is very critical here. You want to have things that are foot pedal, activated or sensors activated. You want to try and prevent the touching of the tip of the sanitizer dispensing points as much as possible. There's also one very important point here is that in the process of facilitation, you must make sure that each facilitation phase has a sanitization station before and after. So when you do the walk around, these are the points you need to really pay attention to. And some airports are using disinfectant carpets. I think somebody is on the line. Okay, that's all right. And some airports are using disinfectant carpets, and where passengers are required to use when they are entering the terminals or using the walkways. We also have to pay attention to frequent waste disposal protocols. And in these times, the PPEs, the mask and the nose mask and the gloves are extensively used. And it's important that we have bins at advantage positions where people can put the use mask and gloves into it. And it's the point there is that obviously as time goes on, we are encouraged to have facilities in the terminal that should be selling these items. And we also must pay attention to the fact that there's the mask have to be changed every now and then, and of course they need places to put it. And in order not to create any additional biohazard in the terminal, it's very important that we do have a place where the disposals would go on without any additional challenges. We can talk about personal protection, and I think the speaker before me talked about the PPEs and the protections that it gives, but it is very important that people in the terminal are all encouraged to wear the face masks. You know, the point that what you see these days is that people walk around and they just don't put them on properly, or they have them put on wrongly. We do have an enforcing system. You must have an enforcing system that must seriously walk around and make sure that people in the terminal are doing what you're supposed to do. It's important that you do this, because without that, then you have challenges coming from your health sector, and that can seriously jeopardize our restart operations. So it's important that all staff are properly briefed, and then you have enforcing teams to make sure that people are enforcing the right use of the PPE. The other point that we need to raise, talk about, is the physical distancing that needs to be adhered to in the terminal. This must also be extended into the buses, the passenger buses, the coach buses, and it's very important that people are always reminded of the fact that you need to have the social distancing as prescribed by your local health organization. It's also, and at this point in time, the marking on the floor is also something that will promptly remind people, and also the ones on the chairs, to make sure that there are social distancing going on very well. The other point also that I would like to bring up here is baggage disinfection. There's a lot of scientific debates going on out there, but I would suggest seriously that you pay close attention to the science and advise yourself appropriately. On health screening measures, we all understand the fact that it has become something that is going to stay with us for quite some time. And already for those of the airports in the West African sub-region, extensively started using these screening methods during the time of Ebola outbreak. And I must say that the protocols for making sure that the airports don't get congested at the point of screening is very, very important, because especially when it comes to the way passengers during the peak hours, the way passengers are allowed to come into the arrivals hall, especially before fever screening, there's always a potential of having congestion over there, and we need to pay attention, and we need to have protocols that make sure that people do not get too close to each other. And we probably have to start getting passengers to start moving in a manner in which not to end up with a congested place right before the screening points. And I think airports will have to pay a very big, attention to that area, because it's a potential place where overcrowding is likely to happen, especially if we don't do anything to our schedules, especially during the peak time. The other point that I would like to bring up here too is got to do with the if airports require that passengers present themselves with a valid PCR test certificate, there's obviously has to be space made available to allow for the inspection of it, and making sure that the place doesn't become another risk area as far as social distancing is concerned. On the passenger health declaration, it's very important that we work with the Ministry of Health of our various countries to find a very better way of utilization. Normally, if you are able to get a lot of these forms to be filled on board the flight, then you reduce the propensity of having a crowded arrivals hall. And if the option exists for electronic declaration forms to be filled, then all the better. So those two concepts needs to be explored, and discussion be held with your health ministry to see how best that can be done. On the issue of ventilation, in the new normal, as we now call it, there's a lot of recommendation to allow a lot of natural air to be recirculated into the terminals, and this is supposed to be more healthy. We are also advised to make sure that ventilation systems are switched on longer hours, probably, and also 2 hours for the building usage and 2 after the usage of the building. And we are also advised strongly to make sure that we replace replace the outdoor air and extract filters as much as possible. Of course, following the advice of the manufacturer of the system. The next point that we need to talk about, that after we've talked about the new normal, is the health experience. This is very important factor when it comes to the restart of operations. The reason is quite simple. We need to build the confidence of passengers once they get into our terminal. The passengers should feel very, very comfortable. The more comfortable they are, the more confidence they get. The more confidence they get, the more they fly. The more they fly, the more our business restart capacity becomes successful. So it's very important that the entire staff understand that we need to show to the passengers that the new normal is safe and that everybody within our space is safe. And until we do that, we can't build on the confidence level. And we don't build on the confidence level, we will not be able to build the business again. Right from all the chain that we have for facilitation, I'm talking about from departures to curbside, all the way to embarkation. The health protocols must be visible, and people must see that we are trying to make sure that if there's going to be any contamination, it should not happen in the terminal. So when you look at the slide that you currently are seeing, you would see that the processes of facilitation is clearly indicated, and each point of the facilitation has a medical input, has a health input, to make sure that it doesn't become a channel for the spread of the virus. And it's important that we understand it that way. It's important that we ensure that it happens. When we go to the arrivals process, it's the same thing. We have to make sure that the passengers feel healthy, they feel confident when they get there, because we would have taken care of all the things that would otherwise let passengers become wary. One area that we need to pay very close attention to in this particular health experience area in the arrivals hall is the baggage claim area, reclaim area. In our part of the world, we tend to operate at peaks, and our peaks are really peaks, and we need to start thinking about how we manage social distancing around the baggage claim area, because that is going to be one area that we need to work very, very hard, either by use of scheduling principles to make sure that people do not overcrowd. And in fact, if you read the biosecurity document by IATA, which was published not too long ago, they've laid emphasis in the document that airports should do whatever they can to make sure that the social distancing at the baggage reclaim points. And I would entreat that all of us take a very close look at the processes of arrival and see how best we can make sure, working very closely with the airlines, to make sure that that place doesn't become a point of concern to our health authorities. We will now go to access control. Our access control points in the terminal should be done in a manner in which to reduce the potential of spread, which means we should try and control access controls as much as possible, reduce the number of the access controls. We also have to start restricting non-passengers from entering the terminal, such as meeters and greeters. We have to close down all the facilities that we have that are not directly related in operations of passengers from one point to the other. So we really need to work making sure that some of the items that we do not need in the terminal that do not impact on operations directly are not brought into the terminal. By so doing, we will reduce the congestion, we would improve the social distancing, and by improving the social distancing, we would then send the right signal to the passenger that, you know, we have a healthy environment, and that he's definitely safe in our environment. And it's important that we work very hard in attaining this. So the high risk airport areas, which are not vital to operations, we should try, such as the prayer rooms, the massage areas, smoking rooms, kids play areas. We should really have them closed down for now until at a time when there is safe for us to do. Remember, we need to always improve the experience of the passenger so the passenger can come back, so the passenger can be confident to fly again. On the issue of social distancing, one cardinal point that affects it seriously, obviously, is got to do with the handling capacity of the airport. And like I said earlier, most of us have what is called very heavy peaks because of our geographical location and our markets and where it's coming from and stuff like that. But it's important that we start engaging the airlines to look at the scheduling, because we need to look at the scheduling to be able to control physical distancing in the terminal. And especially where you have multiple wide-body aircrafts landing within 15-20 minutes of each other, you're definitely going to be challenged by that. And so we need to start thinking seriously with the stakeholders, the ground handling companies, with the airlines, on how we look at the schedules to make sure that congestion within the terminals is managed in a manner that is not going to create a health risk to us. Passenger health processing. I do know, for instance, on our continent, it is something quite known, especially in West Africa. It is very much widely used. So we do have a fair idea about how it works and how we need to work with our health counterparts. It's very important at this stage, with the kind of emergency that we find ourselves in, that we work very closely with our health authorities. Because if we don't collaborate with them, then we will tend to have problems. There's also one thing we must try to do. We must let our health partners, health agencies, understand the facilitation chain. We have to walk them through the chain. The more they understand the chain, the more they are able to meet us halfway in our thinking processes of how to make sure the place is safe and how to whilst maintaining our operations. So it's very important that we do that. On the counters that has to be used for the health checks, we have to make sure they are spaced in a manner that would facilitate passengers' flow and not create congestion. There's one of the most important thing here, though, is in coordination with the health authority, we must make sure that we have various rooms allocated for temporal waiting reasons and also for quarantine reasons. That is for terminals that have not been designed with current quarantine facilities or temporal waiting facilities. We must find ways of creating that so that people who have to be given a secondary look would have to be moved away from the normal queue area to be taken care of. There's also one area that we need to pay attention to, is that in an event where somebody is suspected to be sick, the movement of that person should be done in a manner not to mix with others who are not showing the symptoms. So it's very important we work very closely with our health agencies to make sure that we're able to plan the points of exit in a manner that is not conflicting and increasing the risk level. On security screening, we all know security is one of the areas where we have quite a lot of congestion, and we need to start paying attention to measures to reduce the congestion and to allow for social distancing, and that place not becoming a point of high risk for us. And basically here, one of the first things that must happen is we must make sure that at the point of entry into the security area, passengers are briefed enough to know what they should expect. And this briefing can also be done even before passengers arrive in the terminal, so they have enough information, and they also don't have enough, so that they have minimal surprises when they arrive. Because the idea here is that the more they are briefed on what you do, in terms, especially when it comes to divesting everything you have on you, the easier it is for our men and women to be able to do their job in a safe manner. So it's important that that communication goes out there, and it's important that our lanes are done in a manner to allow for spacing. so we can manage the crowd as much as possible, because it is a potential area that if we don't manage properly, it becomes a point of concern to the passenger, point of concern to our health agencies. And we, as much as possible, we try not to use our hand to do the searching, and the use of handheld metal detectors is advised. And then if for as much as possible, if you have to carry out any such search, you must do it from behind. On the issue of the explosive trace detectors, we are advised to use one swab per person, and as much as possible continue to reuse the swab on people. So it's very important that we look at the protocols of the security screening area, because it's a potential risk area that needs to be managed very carefully to make sure that our staff are protected, and also to make sure that the passengers feel confident and have a healthy experience while they are in our terminal. And one other very important area that we have to look at is on the airside operations, because a lot of the airports have, since the lockdown and since the shutdown of operations, safety management systems have virtually gone to sleep. And now that we are going to restart, it's very important that the safety management system is brought back, strongly, because most of our airside, because of lack of operations, have now become safe havens for wildlife. They become safe havens for all kinds of things. And we have a lot of vegetation that are growing all over on our airfields and things like that. We need to get back to those places and take control over the airfields. And it's important that the implementation of the safety management system at the airside is seriously tackled, to make sure that the airfield comes back to normal, it comes back to what it's supposed to be, to ensure safe operations. And here again, I need to talk about the staff. It's important that if the staff for almost 2 months, 3 months haven't done anything as far as work is concerned, those staff needs to redo their competency training. It's important that the competency training tackles all the areas that they need to know, so that by the time they come back to work and by the time we start having our operations together, we are back in line in terms of our Annex 14 requirements, and we are in place to make sure that we are executing our functions in a safe manner. When it comes to the firefighting aspect of things, it's very important that the firemen who have been at home for quite a couple of months now are retrained to get their certification back. Their competencies must be brought back. The fire tenders have to be looked at. They have to be reserviced. They have to be brought back onto normal operations. And in doing that, we make sure that all the safety issues that are very important to put in place on the air side is in place before we restart our operations. And for those of us who have challenges with aerodrome license renewal, this is the time to start having the conversation with the Civil Aviation Authority and make sure that by the time you start operations, all your requirements as an aerodrome is in place and ready to operate. And on commercial activities, the same principles apply here. The duty-free area needs to be looked at purely from the risk point of view, and as much as possible, hand sanitizers and sanitary gel stations have to be, installed all over the chain of flow. We need to also make sure that cleaning at all contact points are really high and done very, very frequently with the right chemicals. We also need to make sure that customers who walk into shops avoid congregating and crowding, and apply the physical distance and the hygienic measures in the retail shops. We have to also make sure that we adopt cashless transactions within the confines of our terminals and duty-free areas. And also, we need to also provide for the sale of PPEs in our terminals. You are required not to wear the PPEs for too long. And I think in some places, the maximum that is being prescribed, depending on the type of face mask you are wearing, is 4 hours. So in a situation that we find ourselves in, passengers must have the option of buying these PPEs from us within the terminal. So we must work very hard to make sure that the shops have disinfection gels. And of course, it has to meet the 100 ml quantity and also to make sure that we can get these things right in the terminal and supply to make sure that our passengers are experiencing a healthy process, and they are happy and their confidence is coming up. The last point is on restaurants. We need to make sure the restaurants are marked in a manner to ensure safe separation from people to people, and make sure the utensils that are over there are in the right place and also in the right mode in terms of the COVID spread protocols. We have to make sure that common use serving utensils for food should rather be in place, and also adopt the cashless transactions in the shopping and eating places as far as possible. So I would then hand over the next session to Mrs. Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to you. The two previous speakers spoke very profoundly on the people within the airports community, as well as the operations. I think what is equally important is how do we support both of those imperatives in terms of being innovative in the new normal, as well as how do we collaborate with each other as airports, and how do we communicate. So having said that, I'll take you through some slides where we can talk about these initiatives, and we can then just sorry, I just want to share my screen. There we go. All right, so innovating through a touchless experience. COVID-19 has happened. How we adapt to the situation going forward in terms of the new normal is going to become a critical factor and a success for our airport operations. It will also build the confidence of our passengers in terms of the social distancing, which was mentioned by Josephine, as well as how do we apply technologies at suitable areas, which Charles talked to. When we talk about suitable technology, we're talking about technology for our African airports that we can afford, technology that we can prepare for in the medium and long term. So as I said, COVID has become a situation where technology is equally or even more important now. Technology such as biometrics, technology that automates the experience of the passenger. We all know that one device that everybody is very close to, I think apart from when you sleep, is your cell phone. Passengers rely on their cell phones. It's an independent mechanism that will help them through the airport experience, where it becomes a touchless experience for them. They have confidence. It's their cell phone. It doesn't belong to anybody else. There's less of a contact with the various process points within the airport, such as check-in, bag drop, security, boarding onto the aircraft. So we need to look at this type of technology. The technology to support cell phones must be easily integrated with our airlines as well as in the commercial activities, so that passengers can use that technology. This global crisis that has happened has presented an opportunity for innovation and transformation to be accelerated. It's a future investment that's going to grow within our airports, and how we embrace it is going to be very, very important. When we embrace such new concepts, what is very important for the airport community is how do we collaborate and how do we communicate to our stakeholders. One of the things that we can do is a decision-making process at all the touch points through a technological process solution. What we can do is we can conduct a technology assessment at every process where the passenger interacts. We can start off at parking, where the passenger can easily just use their cell phone, or there's a touchless access point for parking. I know it's been implemented at a lot of shopping malls right now. Perhaps that's something that we can consider when passengers enter the parkades of our airports. We then move on to the check-in areas. Passengers then can use their cell phones. We know a lot of passengers check in online. So that is an independent process. We also have to highlight high risk areas and social distancing so that passengers become aware and of their interaction through the airport experience. And then we look at technologies in the medium term, such as facial recognition and biometrics. We also look at areas where we have to implement cleaning technologies, such as sanitizers and the contactless solutions of PAPs, where passengers don't have to touch this type of equipment. We look at a process where our technologies in terms of the engineering controls are implemented in an independent manner. An example would be the elevators, where passengers can approach the elevators without having to actually touch any specific point of that elevator. We also then look at, after we do all these processes, what types of manuals and what types of procedures do we put in place so that our staff can be aware, so that our stakeholders can be aware, and that will enhance the confidence of our passenger. We come back to contactless technologies, and there are various solutions. The parking, as I mentioned, there are contactless payment solutions that can be implemented. Simple things like taps in the washrooms that we have to be cognizant of. These are very important to build confidence with our passengers. We look at the soap dispensers. I spoke to you about the elevator solutions, and we also look at automated sanitizer dispensers across touch points within the airport for between the end-to-end journey. Self-service and automation. This is a technological imperative that has started before COVID-19 and is going to grow. There are various solutions that are out there right now. I know one of the business partners of ACI, CETA, they've come up with very innovative solutions that can be used and also planned for by the airport community, that will improve the facilitation of passenger flows, that will also increase the throughput and efficiency within the terminal space, that will increase terminal capacity with the passengers. It will also help reduce our queue times, bearing in mind that we still have to respect the social distancing. This also helps us to limit our contact with airport staff and the workforce operating within the airport precincts. Such examples of these automated services, as you are aware, are the self-check-in, the self-bag drop, the e-gates with home affairs, the e-gates with boarding that can be taken cognizance of. We go to biometrics, and biometrics can be applied throughout the airport. I know IATA has a concept called the One ID concept, where a facial recognition is applied at the initial phase, at checking in at the airport, and that same process can be carried out throughout the journey of the passenger up until the time they board. So passengers would not have to use their travel documents, they would not have to use paper documentation, but the biometrics would be able to provide all of those services when the passenger checks in. We must remember that right now, the traveling for the passenger is an overwhelming experience. How do we, as airports and our stakeholders, come together to provide a more safe, secure, and also build the confidence of their passengers to build loyalty with them, and also to encourage them to increase their travel via through air transportation. Ladies and gentlemen, we know collaboration and communication is important. It sounds very simplistic, but I think the way we communicate to everybody at the airport, within the airport community, is so important. There's some guiding principles that has been prepared for and that is available in the SCAR guidelines, which is easily adaptable for your staff, for your stakeholders, and also to create the awareness for your passengers. Okay. Collaboration, as you know, is very, very important and very, very essential for our passengers. What we need to do is we need to obtain sources of information from our official channels. So obtain the correct information and share that information on time. Collaborate with government officials, collaborate with our civil aviation authorities and our health authorities so that we are aware of what communication we are sending out, what messages we are sending out. We need to utilize the appropriate channels. How do we communicate? How do we communicate to our staff, to our stakeholders, and to our passengers? We need to keep people, the relevant people, informed, people like that are part of our trade unions, our airlines, our control agencies, our business partners. These are fundamental imperatives that we have to be aware of all the time. We need to also be aware of how do we share our information. Do we use bulletins, briefings, social media? We give guidelines and we have directives to inform everybody within the airport community. We also need to develop appropriate timelines in terms of how we disseminate so we are consistent in our communication. Example, would we like to communicate once a week? Then we keep to that once a week. Would we like to communicate daily? Then we keep to that. We need to demonstrate transparency with our staff and trade unions. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, our staff are effectively our communicators. So how do we communicate with them? How do we listen to them and understand? Because a lot of our staff are operational and on the ground, and they come up with some of the most innovative solutions that we have to be cognizant of, because that actually impacts the passenger very, very importantly. So encouraging and stimulating confidence with our staff, with our passengers, it's very, very important. It sounds very simple, but these are the things, these are the matters that are going to help us with our airport experience, with increasing air travel as we go along. Reinforcing communication with vulnerable people. Remember, youngsters who travel don't really want to communicate with our staff, but our elderly passengers, they would like to connect with people about various aspects within the airport, in terms of touch points, in terms of health-related issues. So how we treat them, as Josephine said, how do we communicate with them is so important. We also have to have indicators throughout the airport. And you can see some of the examples, such as posters, we have videos, leaflets, public announcements, that all of those things builds up the confidence of our passenger that they are in a safe and secure airport. So we also then talk to what Charles alluded to in terms of the facial masks, the social distancing. How do you disinfect your hands? How often do you disinfect your hands? Remember, we're all in this together, and we want to promote air travel is a premium mode of transport going forward. We've all been through the worst situation many years, but how we come out of it is building it together as an airport community. So I re-emphasize, ladies and gentlemen, that we communicate, we collaborate with each other, and then we communicate again. There's no measure that can say, you know what, you've communicated enough. It is so important. We do it simplistically so that people can understand. I don't think we should use language where people will be confused, but we use language, we use actions that people can understand, and they will feel comfortable to come and go from our airports. I'd like to thank you so much for the time, and I'm going to hand over to Ramesh, who will now take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And thank you to all the speakers tonight. So we've reached now the question time. I know that we had some technical problem initially, so I'll allow some more time for during this for some questions. I have a first, at least two questions from Mr. B. Samra, and I think that will be addressed to Charlene. So what Mr. B. Samra wants to know is about the implementation of specific online tools, though he hasn't been specific which online tools. And secondly, I think that you have referred to that in your presentation. It was about solutions, checking solutions, automation going forward in order to decrease the risk of infection. So Charlene, would you like to take up this question? Thank you.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Ramesh. Yes, we have technology that's easily available. Online surveys that can be done. We can have technology deployed at various points within the airport. At our airports at ACI, we have something called the InfoGate, which talks to technology that has been implemented by our IT department. Obviously, there can be something, you know, an online survey that can be provided for at that point in time, or you know, you can do it via your an app that can be created. A quick survey, which will take you 2 to 3 minutes to say, what are your issues? What is pertinent to you? How can this be resolved? And the response times can then be agreed to and communicated respectfully.
Thank you, Charlene. And probably I may add to that. I know that certain airports, certain states are also considering, instead of filling manually the health declaration form, they are considering online filling of those information through different platforms. And these are most of the time managed by the state. There is also another question from Mr. B. Samra. And I guess that it's an important one. What is the risk of having a second wave, of the COVID-19? I wish we don't have a second wave. And I think through the actions and measures that we are all taking individually, as a business, as an organization, and as a state, we will be spared from that second wave. And I know that for our business, we have to do everything within our means in order to prevent, you know, recurrence and a second wave of this COVID-19. There is also another question, and probably I will address that to Charles. Charles, what do you see as the biggest challenge, or the top 3 challenges for African airports during this restart? Although we know that traffic will not be there very soon, but yet it is very challenging on other grounds. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you, Ramesh. I think that for us, one of the biggest challenges we would have is how we constantly engage our health ministries to collaborate with us as we go through the changing phases of the virus spread. It's very important that there's some major collaboration between we and them. This cannot be done by an airport alone, and we need to work very closely with the health agencies. But the health agencies also need to understand the way we process passengers and the protocols for processing passengers. So it's important that we work very closely with them. And if we're able to achieve that, then it becomes a bit smoother in terms of handling this. So we need to work very closely with the health. That's one. Number two is how to bring confidence back to the passenger. It's a very key point here. The passengers should not see the airport as a place of infection. They must see the airport as a safe place, and we must work very, very hard to make sure that we create a safe environment that will boost the confidence of passengers. Because like I said earlier in my presentation, if the passengers are not confident to go through our terminals, then they won't fly. So it's important that we work very hard and achieve that level of confidence in the hearts of the passengers that we serve. Then the last one, I think, is got to do with the implementation of the safety management system for the airports, because we are coming back from no funds, coming back from closed down, and there are some of the issues that needs to be addressed would need money. And the finance sector will say we have no money, there are no airlines coming, so we don't have enough money to fix this problem or that problem. But you know, what you have to understand is that even the first flight that comes into your airport needs to feel safe. So we need to work very hard to find a way of making sure that our airside protocols are in top shape, are in line with all the protocols, to make sure that we are prepared to restart the operation. It will be a very bad thing if anybody starts flying in our airports and have a challenge on the airside. That is going to take the confidence completely away. So we must work very hard to make sure that the protocols are back online and that we are administering our service with all the safety parameters that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I take it from there. You know, in the midst of public health, what we shouldn't forget is that safety and security remains the top priorities of aviation, and they will continue to be the top priorities. So please remember that in your cost-cutting strategies, you know, for your budget and so on, make sure that you don't compromise safety and security at your airport. I have another question, and this one will be addressed to Josephine. How do you see the HR functions and tasks in the new COVID-19 era, and of course after the post-COVID-19?
Thank you, Ramesh, for that question. I would say that whilst we are, as businesses, basically implementing business continuity frameworks, as HR strategic partners, we have to play the role of motivating our staff members, constantly talking to them, reminding them how important they are for us in the midst of delivering our mandates. We should also ensure and put extra efforts in place that our staff members' health and safety is basically prioritized, and support our employees for them to remain passionate and empathetic and compassionate during the implementation of the response strategies, recovery strategies, as we strive towards the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. And I still like the way you put it, smiling now with the eyes, and which is extremely important in restoring, you know, passenger confidence. I have a question now from Adonis Suka from CETA. The question goes as follows. Do you think off-airport passenger and baggage processing will help African airports to decongest departure areas and help complying with social distancing. Maybe I'll answer that. Off-airport checking, off-baggage processing has been a long debate. I would recall that way back in 2003 at our airport, that issue was there because many airports were already facing congestion problems. And one of the solutions would have been off-airport check-in and also off-baggage processing. One of the hurdle has been aviation security, because all the security personnel, they've always challenged that particular aspect. But now things are evolving, the situation is evolving, and I believe that this is the time now to rethink over this whole process of how we can address at the same time aviation security whilst addressing public health issues. And one of the important aspects to consider is the regulatory change with respect to enabling off-airport checking, off-luggage processing, and how we can incorporate that now in the new processes. I would, and this is what we are also advocating, is that all measures that can help, or reduce contact should be experienced, should be trialed, and should be adopted. So I hope that I've answered this question. I have another question from Jean-Luc Rollin, an old friend. So are African airlines enough protected financially to play a major role in the restart? Well, this is a question primarily addressed to airlines. As you know, in Africa, the loss in revenue for airlines ranges between 6 to 8 billion USD, whereas for airports, it is in the range of 2 to 3 billion USD. And here I would like to emphasize that alone, neither airlines, neither airports, businesses will be able to get out. You can just read every day the number of airlines which are going under administration worldwide, including in Africa. And some of the examples are South African Airways, Air Mauritius. They are all under administration, just to name a few. At the level of the African Union, there is we have concerted among all the industry players towards advocating with all the states in order to provide financial support and relief measures to the airlines, to the African airlines, and also to the African airports at par in order to redress the financial situations of those businesses. Let's not forget that aviation is an important driver of the African economy. And we do hope that this move through the African Union will help motivate states in order to provide adequate support to the airlines as well as to airports and other players in the industry. I can take a last question from the audience. Is there anyone willing to intervene? The floor is open for live questions. Hearing none, so I would like to thank all of you for being present today on this ACI Africa webinar. As we said, as we told you initially at the start, we will be having other webinars specifically on key subjects. We will be addressing issues like technology and innovation. We will be looking at financial aspects around this COVID-19. So please watch out for the future webinars of ACI Africa. On the other hand, the video of this webinar will be available by the end of this week on the ACI Africa website. Please note down at the bottom of the page, you will see, you can note down the ACI Africa website. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to us. You have our email addresses on the slide, but also you can also contact us through our website. So please stay safe, keep well, and until we meet next time. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ramesh. Bye.
Bye.